Hello, my name is Friedman. I'm the Director of Peer Programs at Jewish Funders Network, and on behalf of JFN, I'm happy to welcome you to today's Canvas Conversation, Comedy in a Time of Crisis. This is a second program in the Canvas Conversation series of why we invest in our creative communities. Jews have always relied on humor to endure difficult times, but many of the tools the best performers and producers rely on, the theater, the comedy club, a live audience, are inaccessible or compromised in quarantine conditions. For this conversation, Canvas has invited masters of their craft to share how they are lifting spirits and finding new ways to work in the time of crisis. I am pleased to introduce the moderator for today's webinar, Cove, who is the founder of Canvas, among many other titles, to frame the conversation and introduce today's speaker. Thank you, Lou.
Hey, Tamar, thank you so much. Hi, everybody. As Tamar said, I'm Lou Cove. I'm so pleased to welcome you to this Canvas conversation. I hope that everybody is healthy and hanging in there. I know you're all busy, so I appreciate you taking time out for a little Jewish arts and culture today. Part of the Canvas mission is to engage funders and artists in conversation and share ways in which our work can enhance one another's. We're deeply grateful to the Jewish Funders Network, and particularly to David Ezer and Tamar Friedman for helping us to bring these programs your way, and to Andre Spokojny and Dina Fuchs for encouraging collaborative, strategic funding among the JFN community. It's been a real gift. If you missed the last conversation in this series, on literature in a time of crisis, there's a link to the recording of our discussion with Mara B. Gadd, Nathan Englander, and Rachel Kadish that we can put in the chat box. Tomorrow, I can't remember if I gave you that one, but I'll put that in if needed. That one was a deep and diverse and thoughtful exploration into the role of literature and art more broadly in providing connection, empathy, entertainment in the midst of the pandemic. All of those authors are beneficiaries of Canvas grantee, the Jewish Book Council, an organization I encourage you all to explore and support if you haven't already. But today we have four amazing guests: Jena Friedman, Alex Edelman, Steve Bodow, and Tiffany Woolf, each of who has earned major success in mainstream media, bringing their genius to bear on everything from The Daily Show to the latest documentary about Robin Williams. Each of our panelists is a member of the Reboot Network, which is a think tank and an incubator for Jewish creativity that we'll talk a little bit more about later in the program with its CEO, David Katz-Nelson. But it's important to know now that each of our guests has produced at least one Jewish-themed project during the pandemic, and each of those has enjoyed critical success. The other thing that these programs have in common is that they received funding from Reboot to go from concept to reality to the broadest audiences possible. So before we get to the projects and their creators, I just want to provide a quick explanation of what Canvas is all about. Canvas is a funding collaborative that incubated at and is now partnered with Jewish Funders Network. And what began as a series of conversations at JFN conferences and in small gatherings around the country grew into two published reports with the support of the Righteous Persons Foundation about the woefully underfunded sector of Jewish arts and culture. And the findings in those reports led to a plan to encourage, support, and promote a 21st century Jewish cultural renaissance, and to do so through strategic and coordinated giving, education, and cross-sector exposure between funders and artists, between Jewish creatives and secular distribution networks, and between Jewish and mainstream media. Our founding partners of Canvas include the Righteous Persons Foundation, the Jim Joseph Foundation, the Charles and Lynn Schusterman Family Foundation, the Klarman Family Foundation, and the Pella Fund. And I'm pleased to report that we recently welcomed the John Pritzker Family Foundation to the collaborative as well. All of these funders and the entire team at JFN has been steadfast in their support of the work, and they've helped us in just our first year of operations, which concluded last week, August 31st, to pledging more than $1 million to the field, including $180,000 for emergency relief to Jewish creatives economically impacted by the pandemic. And the rest of which was in support of 5 networks of Jewish artists, creatives, and organizations. And those 5 are the Jewish Book Council, the Council of American Jewish Museums, LABA at the 14th Street Y in the East Bay and Buenos Aires, Asylum Arts, and Reboot. So we're proud to be sponsoring all of these networks who collectively represent about 2,000 Jewish creatives and artists around the country. That's a bit about how we got here, and it is absolutely the least funny part of this program, delivered by the least funny person on this Hollywood Squares of Zoom that you see before you. So thank you for indulging me. But let's meet the people who actually have a sense of humor. And I'd like to start with our guest, Jena Friedman, who's joining us as she prepares for a new film where she has a new role. We weren't sure if she can make it at all, so we're super glad, Jena, that you could pop in for a few minutes. If you saw the recent Andy Samberg film, Palm Springs on Netflix, you've seen Jena. She's a stand-up comedian, a writer, a filmmaker. She was a field producer on The Daily Show with Jon Stewart. She's written for The Late Show with David Letterman. She has appeared on Colbert, The Nightly Show with Larry Wilmore, Nat Geo Explorer, MSNBC, and BBC Two. What, was BBC One not good enough for you? Welcome, Jena. Jena, first of all, how are you doing right now?
I'm good. We have a little dog that's barking, so I'm just trying to make sure he doesn't while we're talking. Oh yeah, he was in the, you guys know Potato if you saw The Joy of Quarantine. I'm fine. I mean, considering California's on fire, and how are you? How's everyone?
We're doing okay. I'm wondering, what's it like? What is life like right now for a comedian? I mean, you're a stand-up comedian. You tour. How have things changed? What does it look like?
I was a stand-up comedian before COVID. I also I write and direct, so that's pretty much how I've been spending the bulk of my work time now, just writing and directing projects. But yes, a lot of stand-up comedians have had to figure out how to kind of survive. I mean, like, people make stand-up was never my bread and butter. Like, it was more just writing, and so I was a little bit more insulated when COVID happened. But I was about to go on like a 5-country tour, and then I have a show with Adult Swim that we were going into production in New York in April. And so all of that was wiped off the map, and I had to kind of quickly pivot. And thanks to Reboot, I was having a conversation with Francine Hermelin, and she talked about how there is money at Reboot for creatives if we wanted to make projects. And I thought about what I could do that aligned with what Reboot does. And then together we created this cooking show, because I also found that I was cooking a lot just in a therapeutic way. And there's something very interesting about having never cooked before and then just tapping into this lineage of Jewish cuisine. And so that's how the web show Joy of Quarantine emerged. It was thanks to Reboot and just having the time of having everything completely canceled because of the pandemic.
Yeah. So I've watched Joy of Quarantine. You've covered lots of different foods. We've chosen today to show a clip from the episode in which you make cholent.
I try.
Or in which you try to make cholent. So David Ezer, if we can run that clip, let's see it, and then we'll talk to Jena on the back end of it.
I'm gonna name the chicken after my favorite baby name for girls, Ro. Ro is a great name for a girl, for the girl you're gonna be forced to have once the Supreme Court overturns Roe v. Wade. It's too political for this show, I'll try it again. Hi, here's our little chicken. I named the bird Hitler, just to make it less sad. Okay, Hitler. All right, Hitler. You can do it. Don't hurt me, Jenna. We're almost there, Hitler. Just a couple more pieces. I'm sorry, I'm actually, I only wear vegan leather. Okay. Put a cap full of Schlivovitz. There you go. A little bit of potato couldn't hurt. Ah, just cut my nail. It's better this way. You don't have to get a manicure. You can just kind of cut your fingers off while you're cooking, and it's called multitasking. Yeah, we're gonna do a little.
Don't put any more Schlivovitz.
Honestly, I think it's gotta go in. I promise. So a little more Schlivovitz. Cup of water. There you go. That looks like a cholent. So from the fallout shelter, I have some Great Northern white beans. They make you fart. And if you're in a loving relationship, they're just a nice thing to add to the mix. Put it on a lowish heat for about 12 hours. There we go. This cholent is incredible. The only problem with it is that there are tiny little bone shards in almost every bite, which means you have to be very careful when you eat it. There's a tragedy in every bite. It's pretty much how I think of Judaism as well. There's so much joy, but there's also so much pain and suffering, and we can never ever really relax. It's like what it is to eat this.
Hi.
Awesome. Thank you. I want to say to folks watching, we're hoping that the video fidelity and the audio is working okay, but we're also putting links to these in. If you're having trouble seeing them, you can click on the links, and you'll be able to watch that way as well. So Jena, that last bit, the removal of the bone shard, the tragedy commingling with the joy, that was like every Seder I've ever been to. That was brilliant.
Cool.
And also, how is it that you have both a fallout shelter and a bottle of Schlivovitz? I wouldn't know where to get a bottle of Schlivovitz.
It's not cholent, whoever. It's not cholent. It wasn't cholent. Our friend Scott brought the Schlivovitz. It's his own brand of Schlivovitz. But yes, it wasn't cholent. I wanted to do a chicken version of it, but now I see that cholent is a slow cooked stew and chicken doesn't really work in that context. So I know that wasn't cholent, but it was just trying to it was like a reconstructionist version of Jewish cuisine.
You rebooted cholent.
And I know it was controversial, but the other thing is it was one of those things where it's also Jewish cuisine. I feel like because it is part of my heritage, I can kind of be a little bit more inventive, where if I was trying to cook with something else, I would get in trouble because, but wait, what was your question?
Oh, I was just wondering where I can get a bottle of Schlivovitz.
Oh yeah. Scott Soberoff. I think that's how no, that's not. It sounds like a weird name for somebody with a Schlivovitz line. But yeah, was it Scott Green? Okay, we'll get you.
Scott Goodstein. Yeah, we're really bad.
Goodstein.
Scott Goodstein.
There is a Scott Soberoff, which is not the same Scott. And so yeah, okay, we'll get you a bottle of his Schlivovitz. It was very good
and
for
Schlivovitz. Let's share, David, if you can share how to get Schlivovitz or the Schlivovitz brand, because it's coming back, people. On a serious note, Jena, your role in the world is really important, making people laugh. And the inclination is to kind of like right now, everyone's like, it's so important right now to make people laugh, but I feel like it's really important all the time. We depend on funny people. We want to make sure that those people keep working and keep finding new ways to make us laugh, both about our Jewish identities, but everything else as well. And given that, this is an audience of philanthropists wondering, and just as audience members, as philanthropists, donors, how can we support artists right now? What's the best thing people could do to be supportive of creatives who might be sitting on the bench right now or producing work, but don't have the traditional means of getting it out to the audiences that they would normally see in a theater or a comedy club?
I mean, I think just helping them get their stuff out there. It's tricky because live performance, I think people are slowly getting back into it and figuring out ways to do it safely. But just, I think even with COVID, everything that is operating at like a quarter of the capacity. Productions just take a lot more effort to get off the ground. So helping people, pick up the slack in any ways that you can just to get stuff out there. And I think, I'm really sad that live comedy is hard to do right now, especially in this time, because I do think that like live comedy in particular is it's not even just about laughing. There's like this democratizing element of people who disagree sharing a space and laughing together. And I think in times like these politically, it's really important to try to tap into our shared experiences as humans, despite where we lie on the political spectrum. And so I think, in general, comedy is catharsis, but it's just so much more as well. And so I think anywhere you can, if you can support younger artists in particular, who, I have had the benefit of, I still have work in this time because I've been able to spend like my first decade as a comedian out there and performing, but a lot of younger artists who are still kind of making a name for themselves are struggling. So I think that that's a really cool place if you can support, just support all artists and the ones trying to do stuff who don't necessarily have the ability to get work without being, out there hustling for it. But yeah, I think even just being here and thinking about ways you can support Reboot and other organizations is definitely the right move.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Jena. I know you have to go act and be funny. Thank you again for joining us. Break a cholent leg, and we'll talk to you soon.
I know it wasn't cholent. Thank you guys so much
break
for
a chicken
everything. Bye. Thanks.
Thanks again. Okay, so we're going to turn now to Steve Bodow, who's a television writer and producer, most recently executive producer and showrunner of Netflix's Patriot Act with Hassan Minhaj. He was executive producer of The Daily Show with Trevor Noah from 2015 to 2019, and that followed 13 years as executive producer and head writer and staff writer on The Daily Show with Jon Stewart. He has a new Reboot-powered podcast called In Quarantine, which is funny and serious, it's thoughtful, and it's insightful. I met Steve when he was at The Daily Show, and he's been behind the camera and away from the microphone as long as I've known him, so it's exciting to see him step up to the mic with this project. It feels completely natural and super funny. So welcome, Steve, and thanks for taking a little time today.
Hey, thank you, Lou. Good to see you.
It's great to have you. It's good to see you. Where are you? How are you holding up? Let's start there.
I am in the last few days of the slightly upstate New York house that we've been renting since the middle of March, up in Orange County, New York, which is about 50 miles north of the city, and just down the hill from Kiryas Joel, for any of you fans of Kiryas Joel. But in a couple days, we go back to Brooklyn, where we actually live. My kids are starting school 1 day a week in person, so we're going to give that a try and also just try to live at home.
All right.
For a change.
Well, we wish you a safe return to the old country.
Thank you.
So, Steve, you've done a lot of television. What made you want to do a podcast?
I like talking. I just like sort of being in conversation with people. And it was something that I had loosely in mind for a while, but didn't really have the right venue or idea or opportunity to do it. And then right towards the beginning of the pandemic, I think before we even left town, I'm also on the board of Reboot, and we board members were having a discussion about how should our organization shift to, to deal with the pandemic, and what could we do to, help both the membership and community at large. And since a lot of what Reboot does is it's sort of R&D for creative and cultural ideas, we were going to do this big in-person ideas festival in San Francisco that got canceled. What else? What can we do in a more media way? And it was also becoming quickly apparent that we were all going to sort of be inside for a while and like not seeing anybody in person for a while. And I thought that, I'm going to miss seeing and talking to people. Maybe I should just do that, but do it, as a podcast. And it started out as being conversations between me and other people in the Reboot network, talking about life during Corona, personally, professionally, and also, what, if any, aspects of Jewish life the pandemic was affecting. Since then, it's expanded to people outside the network as well, but still with that same set of concerns and perspectives. And it's been a lot of fun.
Well, I've really enjoyed it. I want to share two clips and two different clips from the podcast, just brief bits, and we can talk about them after. Let's listen to the first one, which is an interview with Ronnie Chang, who's a Chinese stand-up comedian who I think worked on The Daily Show at some point.
That's how I knew him. Yeah, we worked together for a time in recent years. But I had not. When I did talk to him for this, I hadn't talked to him in maybe 8 or 9 months, and all the pandemic stuff had happened, in the interim.
Right. So let's listen to this clip. It's about holidays and food, and it's perfect for a webinar in advance of the high holidays. So let's take a listen.
Asia's a real melting pot in terms of culture, because you have Indian mixed with Malay, mixed with Chinese people, plus, with Thai and Filipinos and Indonesians. And so the food mixes together and turns out fucking awesome.
Can I ask you some advice as an ethnically Chinese person? We've got the Jews, we've got our New Year's coming up in just a few weeks. Rosh Hashanah is coming up. It's a big holiday for us, but it's not as big as Chinese New Year's. And
it's not a competition, but okay.
But if it were, we'd be losing. And it seems like you guys have quite a few ideas for how to have a good time. I wonder if there's any that you would recommend to us that we might think about borrowing to spice our New Year's up a little bit, because it is a few weeks away and we could use a little boost.
Interesting. Do you have any kind of mythical animals that you can kind of
mythical animals
that you can create some kind of?
Our mythical animals are mostly in the form of like pot roast. The gefilte fish, I think, is a mythical animal.
Well, if you could dress up like a what was that? Gilberta fish? Gefilte fish. Yeah, gefilte fish. Yeah, because I feel like a lot of the Chinese, what we make a big deal about on Chinese New Year is like the mythical animal shit. So if there's some kind of equivalent to a lion dance or
those dragon dances, those are nice. Yeah.
Maybe that could help, with your parades.
I think that would help a great deal. I think the kids would get a lot more excited about that. Now, the selling points for the children on Rosh Hashanah are that, challah, instead of being long, is round.
Okay.
That's sort of the big thing. And it doesn't excite the kids as much as a dragon parade with fireworks would tend to do.
Yeah, fireworks. I don't know. What is America? We're just pitching ideas here. I'm just brainstorming. I don't know. Maybe a piñata.
That's good too.
Yeah, just a piñata, but maybe like in the shape of a dreidel, or again,
yes, that's not a dreidel. Is not a Rosh Hashanah thing exactly, but no bad ideas. There's no bad ideas here, Ronnie.
Yeah. Just pitching.
Great. Thanks. Thanks, David. Steve, that's so funny. So we need a, I like the idea of a dreidel pinata.
It's a good idea.
Yeah.
Is it a Rosh Hashanah idea?
But I just appreciate you drawing those parallels between the excitement between the long and the round challah versus the dragon and the fireworks. Yes, thank you for that. So let's listen to, actually, before we jump, what I loved about that conversation is that it's a cross-cultural conversation. And it kind of gives us new ways of looking at old things, learning from one another. Has that been a theme on the podcast? What's important about those kinds of conversations?
I would say, so I've done sort of two, we call them seasons, which is sort of grandiose. They've just been sort of flights of episodes. The spring was mostly people from, inside the network. And it was also, we were more experiencing, everybody's just experiencing like the shock of the pandemic. And I would say I was dealing with that. In the second wave, as the pandemic sort of normalized and society moved on to, have some conversations around protests and Black Lives things. Obviously with Ronnie, that's cross-cultural too. So it's been widening out in a way, as I think as the, as I say, the shock of Corona times is, evening out a bit and other things are coming to the fore. It's felt natural to bring some of those in as well, which the clip you're about to play, I think, is a good example of that. We had Senator Cory Booker was on the show, and we talked a lot of politics, we talked a lot of protests, but Cory also has, a lot of people know this, but a lot of people don't. Cory actually has a deep and longstanding, even scholarly interest in a lot of Jewish culture and texts, and so we talked about that a little bit.
Yeah, Cory Booker really knows his Torah. It's kind of amazing. Let's, David Easer, if we could listen to that clip, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the Cory interview.
The question I wanted to ask was, just specifically during the pandemic, what have you drawn on or found in Judaism that's spoken to you, inspired you, helped, just seemed relevant, if anything?
I think the reason why I'm stumped is because you said during the pandemic.
During the pandemic, yeah.
Because leading into the pandemic, there was a passage of the Torah that was driving me through my presidential campaign.
I will accept that answer. Let's hear that.
Because it was really the Torah portion that I would speak of, and in so many of my campaign stops, because I think it's one of the more profound moments of despair, and the emergence of hope. And the moment, let me just give you a little more background. The words that I'm going to quote to you, if you go there right now to the Lorraine Motel, you will see words from the Torah written at the very spot that Martin Luther King was killed. And so think of the grief and the wretchedness and the darkness of that assassination, that murder. And so the words are from Joseph's brothers when they see Joseph approaching, and they utter these words. They grab him to kill him, and they throw him into a well. And we know, though, that he didn't die there as they intended, that he rose and he led a nation through crisis, Egypt. And the words from the Torah, translated in English, and the words written where King was slain, are simply, "Behold, here cometh the dreamer. Let us slay him and see what becomes of his dream." And I really think that for me, at a time of great despair, where you see death and violence and just the wretchedness of a moment, that the dream should still drive us. And that in many ways, I just believe that we're a nation at that point where we have seen so many fallen, But we have to answer that question. A new generation has to answer that question now. What will become of the dream? And maybe, just maybe, we can rise up from where we are. And we too can lead a nation through crisis to better days. And that is my hope and my prayer.
Senator Cory Booker, we're going to leave it there. That's a good place to go out. Thank you so much for joining us on In Quarantine.
Thank you, my friend.
I'm Steve Bodow. We'll see you next time.
Steve, I've been with Cory Booker. I've heard him give these kind of talks and do so completely extemporaneously and with more authority and understanding than a lot of Jews I know. So it's the real deal. Were you surprised by his depth of knowledge and that kind of passion for Torah?
Well, I wasn't, only because I've known him for a little while. But of course, when I first learned it, it was quite surprising. It's not what you'd expect from a typical African American, which I suppose he is not. But that particular story, I definitely didn't know that there's Old Testament verse right there where Dr. King was killed. And Cory was able, as he so often is, to not only draw on that piece of historical knowledge, but relate it to what's going on currently. Really make you feel something. Now, I should point out, that was not comedy.
Well, we promised comedy.
Probably you guys noticed that was not comedy, but not everything that we're doing on the podcast is. But that's that's sort of the mix I like. And some of the conversation I had with even Senator Booker was much more lighthearted and funny. I like talking. Sometimes funny, sometimes serious, and podcast is a place to do that.
I love the podcast. I encourage everyone to listen to every episode. There's a link in the chat for you, so you can listen at your podcasting convenience. Steve, thanks for doing it. Really, really grateful to you for that, and thanks for being here today. Okay, I'm going to turn us to Alex Edelman, who is a comedian, a writer, a performer. He was the head writer and lead laugh generator for Saturday Night Seder, which was an all-star musical streaming Passover Seder to benefit the CDC Foundation's Coronavirus Emergency Response Fund. And it has raised more than $3+ million, Alex, since it premiered in April. It's incredible. I want to mention before we get into it, Alex also has a new album out, which you could stream and purchase, called Until Now. So again, encourage you to do it. And finally, I learned yesterday that Alex went to Maimonides right across the street from my mother's home in Brookline, Massachusetts. So we have real yichus. Alex, welcome. Thanks for joining today.
Thanks, man. Hey, thanks, though. I love all the other panelists. So I'm psyched to be, especially Steve. I'm a big Steve fan. So psyched to be part of the crew. Hi, Steve. Oh my God, I'm so starstruck. All right, go off camera. Go off camera. I don't want you watching.
Too distracting.
But yeah, I mean.
So how's life for a stand-up comedian looking these days?
The funny thing is that I like Jena was on tour with a solo show when this all went down. I had a show about, I went to a meeting of neo-Nazis in Long Island City in winter of 2018. So I was touring a show about that.
Right. Can I just interrupt to ask, how, with all due respect, how'd you get past security?
I keep a list of anti-Semites on Twitter called Jewish National Fund contributors, even though they're obviously not. I get a lot of messages from people on Twitter going, take me off your list. I have never contributed to the Jewish National Fund. And I always write back, there's still time. But yeah, so one of these anti-Semites tweeted something about like a meeting at an apartment in Long Island City. So I went. But yeah, I was touring that, and I was in England when it all went down. And obviously all my stuff got wiped out. So you know, but things are starting to come back a little bit. I'm doing the odd, I'm doing some like Jewish event in Houston in December, and like work is starting to pop back up a little bit. I'm gonna be in Phillies over New Year's, but like, yeah, it's a shame. It's not super fun.
Yeah, and it's not easy anyway, right? I mean, this is hard work.
I mean, yes, that feels like it's very fulfilling. You know, there's a wonderfully robust, you know, support system for stand-up comics abroad and in the United States. But yeah, it's tough at the best of times, because there's so much noise to break through, and I'm a bit of a, you know, I'm a bit of a niche comedian, like sort of like a thoughtful Jewy comic. But yeah, I mean, it's not easy at the best of times, and now it's compounded.
Right. So you were behind a show in partnership with Reboot, that Reboot supported, called Saturday Night Seder.
Yeah.
The entire thing is online, so if people have not seen it, by all means, you should, and you've got some binging to do tonight. But you won't be alone. It was a huge success. So let's start with what you said in the writer's room on that first day. What was your directive?
Yeah, I mean, so here's the thing. I actually have I'm really psyched to be saying this on like a call for people who fund Jewish art, but I have like a real bug in my bonnet. That's not the right term phrase, but I don't like like totemic Jewish art. So like our first day in the writer's room, I was like, no brisket, no bubby, no bagels, like no crappy jokes about stuff that is just like, that doesn't actually represent a Jewish experience. Like, we're gonna have a really thoughtful, interrogative, funny, inclusive Seder, but we're not gonna do any of this schmaltzy Jewish stereotype that so characterizes so much average Jewish art. So I think that sort of high standard, we cut a lot of stuff actually, because it was, you know, schmaltzy and easy. We ended up with a really, to the point that a couple of the other writers were like, "You're being a snob," and I was like, 1,000%. Like, I will not have middle of the road, like caricature. And so, yeah, I think that really panned out in the end for us, though.
So, I mean, that kind of relates to a theme that's been very important for Canvas, for the funders behind Canvas, and kind of the message that we want to convey is, you know, one of excellence and identifying excellence. And what I think I hear you saying is not to say that bubbies or bagels aren't part of the Jewish experience, but that's easy and maybe lazy at this point, because it's been done ad nauseum, and there are other places to go.
I agree. I mean, like, I think right now, in terms of Jewish creatives, there's so much talent and diversity of thought. Like, you know, the people that we worked with on the Seder were, you know, fantastic folks, like Ben Pasek and Adam Cantor were sort of it was a super collaborative effort, but there's a lot of Jewish talent right now, and not enough, you know, and the reason that, you know, there aren't a ton of channels and platforms for those people to do it. Sadly, I think there need to be more opportunities for interesting Jewish stuff. And I mean, there are good places. There's, you know, there are a bunch of different, like, wonderful foundations and outlets, but there aren't enough right now in those places. Yeah, I mean.
So let's, speaking of excellence, let's watch a little bit of Saturday Night Seder, and we'll start with the first clip. They're both musical numbers, but this is the opening piece. Do you want to set this up?
Yeah, we wanted something that was like, that sort of let people know what they were watching, and we wanted to introduce like some talented folks, and also it's really handmade. Like, this clip actually, it has a really handmade feel to let the audience know that it's going to be a bit of a handmade special. And the last number is like a bit more flashy and impressive, but like, yeah, this is the opening number to Saturday Night Seder with our host Alexander and some other people.
Okay, Let's take a look.
About and even more to eat. Take your shoes off, hang your coat up. There's the bathroom. Have a seat. So you're stressed by all the stories that you hear on cable news. Well, it's time to trade the cable for a table full of Jews. Hey. This night is always different from every other night. There's a smidgen of religion, but we're keeping that part light. Tonight is even stranger than the average Pesach meal because we're trapped in our apartments and the plagues are effing real. Dayenu, enough's enough. So the world's a bit fakakta, still we've been through tougher stuff. Dayenu. In truth, it's been a lot, but my goodness, let's be grateful for the good things that we've got. Dayenu, what more is there to say? When you can't go out, get drunk and shout Dayenu anyway.
So you need to go out shopping, but it's better not to risk it. Use some fruit snacks for Ferosit and beef jerky for the brisket.
If you're out of greens and table salt, well, don't you fret, my dears. Just use a stick of celery to wipe away your tears.
Dayenu. The kids all need the bath. The only thing they learn in homeschool is their father sucks at math. Dayenu.
Tonight the food's symbolic. The egg means spring.
And all this wine means I'm an alcoholic.
Dayenu.
What more is there to say? When life is hell, you gotta yell Dayenu anyway.
So we invited every putz and altar partner, not to mention every bench and every knock, to come together as one glorious Mishpachah, and give to giving some
Yes, Josh Groban, everyone, the greatest Jewish voice in Zero Mustel.
Thank you. I'm actually not Jewish.
We get there's a sketch after that about like the people that we've had that folks think are Jewish but are not in fact Jewish, like Darren Criss and Rachel Brosnahan. But Josh is half Jewish, but he played the comedy of the sketch.
I thought it was great. I'm sorry people didn't get to just hear the confessions of the Goyim at the end of the song, but it's awesome. I have to ask, because I haven't had a chance to ask you before, how did you pull that off? Like how do you pull that off?
Well, I mean, technically we broke it down into parts, and then each of us, we segment directed all of the celebrities we got on a Zoom with them, explained what we wanted them to do. Sometimes we watched them do with their iPhone or their iPad what they were recording, and then they would send it to us and we try to, incorporate. But we had a really distinctive run of show that was compiled by our super producer, Rachel Sussman and Rebecca Halperin. And they did a great job. And we sort of worked off that. I worked with them sort of marrying the script in our run of show. So just keeping careful track and making sure we had all the assets we needed. And just like Josh Groban, like some of those people, you see why they're the people that they are. Like Josh Groban nailed that on the first take, but it took a lot of work. And the thing is that at least once a week, one of us gets approached about doing another Saturday Night Seder for, an organization. And we have to explain that it's actually a massive undertaking. Adam Cantor and I sketched out the numbers, and that was it was $500,000 of effort from people alone. And, our budget was only about, we got a couple of grand from Reboot for editors because we felt bad, not paying editors. And there were some other smaller associated costs, but everyone donated their time. And I think, it's been a bit of a shame because we would love to do more Saturday Night Seders, but without, this was early on in a pandemic where people really needed a creative outlet for their observant instincts and their desire for community. And just it's kind of lightning in a bottle. It's really not going to happen again because frankly, the money's not there to get all those people, back together.
Well, you're saying that to a group of folks who are philanthropically inclined, and it was in its own way a donation to the community. I mean, it really was just a total giving back to the community. I think on the one hand, you could say, look, the expense to pull that off and the return on investment was tremendous, but it's deceptive because to really do that, as you're saying, if people enjoy that, people want to see more like work like that, there's a real cost to doing that work.
I mean, and I don't want to sound like a bit like, fiscally conservative here, but like you can't expect people to, like, we started that writer's room on March 20th and we aired on April 11th. And like, it was 3 weeks of dedicated flat out work from all of these people. And like, it's just not realistic to ask people to do this on a sort of like donation basis, because you sort of get a schwach product. You get like you get what you pay for. And so it's been, all of us, every single person involved in Seder since then has done bits and bobs for various organizations like Benj, Mark, and I, two of the writers. We helped out with the Israel Cancer Research thing, and Adam Cantor and I did the Sharsheret benefit. But like, we have to explain all these organizations that it's that we desperately want to help and raise money, and we're thrilled to do that in a time when arts organizations and Jewish charities are struggling. But in order to actually create good content, there actually needs to be funding for this diverse spectrum of stuff that funds distribution channels and platforms that makes the presentation of this work worth it for the artist. Stuff that funds the actual time that it's going to take for an artist to do this. Like if you're going to get someone like Steve or Jena, you need money that makes it something that they can actually focus on, make it their primary focus.
So to the funders that are listening, and by the way, you're invited to put your questions in the chat. One very simple strategic way of thinking about this when you're reviewing those organizations that you're supporting is, do they actually have a budget line for this kind of work? A lot of organizations, a lot of charities that you support then go out and they ask all of these creative people to volunteer their time and volunteer their resources, their connections, their experience to produce this kind of work. And it really does cost. And if we want to see quality, then certainly, building it into the budgets is one very simple strategic way of making sure that happens. But obviously the work doesn't simply need to be done just for charity's sake. I mean, I also, we really value art for art's sake too. So there's the value intrinsic in that as well.
I think the thing is, like, there are a bunch of great organizations and great platforms. I'm just using Tablet Magazine as an example. I really like Tablet Magazine. Like, it's a wonderful, and I'm about to later this afternoon, LA time, but evening tonight, I'm going to do something for JW3 in the UK, which is a really wonderful Jewish art center. But like, in order to create like actual robust product that makes an impact, like you need sufficient funding at every point. You need to fund the artist at the creation point. You need to fund the artist at the distribution point, and then you need to fund the artist at the media coverage point. And frankly, like, I've been touring this like very Jewish show even before the pandemic started, and my agents are just like, sorry, like we can. Like I do art centers, I do arts organizations, and they're like, it's a very Jewish show. It's a show about anti-Semitism in like 2019, 2020. And honestly, Jewish arts organizations can't, like, there aren't the resources there that they need to put on that show. So it ends up going to like, an Arts Depot in Cambridge, or it ends up going to the, I don't know.
We've heard that. I mean, we at Canvas, we've certainly heard that theme repeated across the performance spectrum, from musicians, from theater people. It's an issue that we're looking at closely. I want to get more into these questions with the whole group, but I wanted to show one more clip because this goes a little bit more to the catharsis part. This is a little bit less on the comedy side, more on the catharsis, but it's got a little bit of a different tone, a lot more participants. Do you want to list just a few of the folks or examples of who we're about to see, just so people may not know everyone? Or there's too many to list, but
I mean, this is my favorite thing from Seder, honestly. This is like the big part of this was like, I come from a traditional Jewish background. We had a lot of progressive people involved in the creation of the show, and sort of in a true modern Orthodox fashion, I wanted to blend traditional values with, progressive reinterpretation. And so many people on our team excelled in the progressive reinterpretation. And the last line of the Seder is Lashana Haba Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem. And so we wanted to stay true. We use a closing number that stayed true to that message and truly left us with next year in Jerusalem. But we wanted to sort of show how, something that traditional can be faithfully reinterpreted in the 21st century by Jews and non-Jewish Passover enthusiasts. So there are quite a few Jews in here, and there are, everyday folks, and we have people like, Whoopi Goldberg and Tan France from Queer Eye, and to me, it's a really wonderful communal piece that really sums up the spirit of our Seder. The song's called Next Year.
I think it speaks for itself, so I'm not going to say any more. David can run that clip.
We're gonna get by till it's here. So here's to next year. Next year. Here's to next year. Oh yeah. All right. Here's to next year. Next year. Next year.
Next year, hugging and kissing every single person I've ever loved in my entire life.
Next year, everywhere in the world.
Next year, in Jerusalem, all of us in good health.
Next year, not year.
Next year, we will be on vacation.
To what?
To Hawaii.
With friends.
With friends.
And family.
And family, sure.
Why are you copying me?
Next year, in a more fair country.
Next year, with our families and chosen families.
हम लोग भी अपना दूसरे बिजनेस के लिए कुछ अपना खुद का बिजनेस हो और अपना बिजनेस सक्सेसफुल रहे तो अपनी फैमिली के साथ मुंबई में शिफ्ट हो सके.
Next year in a real democracy.
Next year in a theater with all of you.
I'm gonna say next year at my boyfriend's house. I'm looking for a man, a nice man.
Next year, performing for everyone in the same room.
Next year,
with her grandparents.
Next year, holding hands.
Next year, I want to be surrounded by even more of my Jewish brothers and sisters.
Next year, with hugs and kisses with family.
Next year, in my mom's kitchen in Long Island.
Next year, by Lake Michigan in Chicago with my family.
Next year, mask-free, drinking gin and tonics.
Next year, in health, at peace, with family, at home.
Next year, world will break next year. Taking the skies.
The world will break open. We'll breathe in the sky. It's gonna be better. It's gonna be brighter.
As you wonder and wonder how long you'll stay lost.
Remember the oceans and deserts we've already crossed.
Good night, everybody. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay inside. Next year in Jerusalem. God bless.
So I totally got chills. I've seen this and I still get chills watching. It's obviously emotional for you, Alex. What's...
Yeah, my dad is the last person in the next year montage. So I always get choked up. Pardon me. I always get choked up in quarantine. That's my dad and his nurses. He works at Brigham Women's Hospital in Boston. So So yeah, I get a little emotional watching that video, and I haven't seen it in a little bit. So yeah, it's very like it's something we really cared about, and everyone's families were really supportive when we put it together, and so I mean it's the best thing I've ever been a part of. So and it really sorry, I'm mortified, but it was it was really powerful to put it together, and I feel like given the resources that we needed due to the generosity of folks that helped fund it and the folks that donated their time above and below the line, we were able to, and we had total artistic freedom. Like we ran the room the way we wanted. I'm listed as head writer, but in terms of ideas, the best idea always won. There was zero ego from anybody involved. Folks like Adam Cantor, who produced it, and Jen Snow did PR, and all of the interns and PAs that gave their time for free. Given the freedom that we had, we were just able to make a product that every single one of us were so proud of. And the love that we got and the money we raised is, I don't want to, I mean, that's the point, surely, the money that was raised and the way that people, felt community and Seder in this time is really important. But from the creative side, just the fact that we're able to do what we wanted, how we wanted, in a time where that was literally impossible, was the best. Diane, just that.
The quality, the feeling, it all comes through. It's an amazing piece of work, and it was really a gift. So thank you for working on it and making it possible. Thanks for joining today. I want to bring Tiffany Woolf into the discussion. Tiffany also has a Brookline connection, and in fact, we went to the same high school, Brookline High School, forever.
That's right.
Tiffany has decades of experience in PR and in entertainment and film, public interest communication. She was on the Dalai Lama's PR team. Yes, even the world's most enlightened guru needs some promotion from time to time.
Yes.
In 2018, Tiffany partnered with Reboot to launch Silver Screen Studios, which we're going to learn a bit more about in just a moment. She has a new film she's supporting about Robin Williams, which just hit #1 on Apple downloads last week. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm so happy to have you here, Tiffany. Thanks for joining. You're in the Bay Area, so I have to just ask, how are you holding up? Is everybody safe? What are the conditions like today? We know it's a rough time right now, on top of a rough time.
Well, thank you, Lou, and thank you to all of these incredible panelists. This has been such a beautiful and inspiring and funny and meaningful conversation, so I'm really thrilled to be a part of it. I am in the Bay Area, so we, as some of my other Bay Area colleagues on this call, can attest to that it's a Mars-like quality to it. My kids are all in various rooms doing online schooling, and we do what we can and we get by and we're okay.
And that the air clears really soon.
Yes.
So let's Silver Screen Studios and Dispatches from Quarantine. Rather than have you explain it, I think we should show your clip first, because you actually do a little explaining in the clip, and then we could talk about the work afterwards. So, David, if we can run the Dispatches from Quarantine piece, we'll take a look.
My name is Carl Ryder. Used to be and still is. And these are dispatches from quarantine. My parents loved comedy. They took me to the movie, my brother and I, to the movies every Sunday. They looked for things like the Marx Brothers, the Ritz Brothers, and we looked for that To this day, I keep looking for great comics, and there are great, they keep evolving. As the times evolve, so do the comics. But that was nothing bigger in our life than going to comedy movies.
I'll see you at the theater tonight. I'll hold your seat till you get there. After you get there, you're on your own.
My brother's the one who decided that I was humorous. There was a free acting class downtown in the New York Daily News. There's free acting classes at 100 Center Street. And I went down there, and I was wondering why, until lately, as a matter of fact, my brother saw in me a humor. And I credit him with the fact that I became an actor because I became in show business. And I remember what it was the other day. When I was a kid, I used to watch radio, and there was a guy who considered himself the most stubborn man on earth. And this is a routine he did, and which I copied, and they remembered it. I almost didn't. He says, I'm the most stubborn person on earth. I had a toothache. I took myself to the dentist. I said to the dentist, I got a toothache. Take me out the tooth.
He said, which tooth is hurting you? I wouldn't answer him. I told him I brought the toothache. You got the education. Open up my mouth, look around there, see what's going on. He yanked me out of tooth. He said, that's the tooth. I said, no. He yanked me out of another tooth. He said, that's the tooth. I said, no.
All right. So Tiffany, maybe you can explain the context for what we just saw and what you've been up to.
So just maybe by way of background, I lost my parents at a young age. And as I've grown older, I realized I didn't have the role models of what it looks like to have a great last act of your life, what it looks like to be a well-lived 85-year-old. I've always had an affinity for older generations. I worked in nursing homes in college. I tend to strike up conversations, or used to pre-pandemic, with older people I would meet at a park bench or Starbucks, and we'd become friends. So I brought this idea, thankfully, to Reboot a few years ago of wanting to take my passion for capturing stories of older role models and perhaps making little digital short films to inspire younger audiences to talk to their grandparents more, their older loved ones. And with Reboot, we created this platform called Silver Screen Studios. The last 2 years, I've had the good fortune to travel the country interviewing Jewish older role models. Risa, a 102-year-old Holocaust survivor that talks about always following the blessings, to Senator Carl Levin about equity and humanity. It's been an incredible journey to be able to capture these stories and with our little nimble crew that really are time capsules and so important to capture. Then, of course, COVID hit, the pandemic, and we thought, well, these stories are more important than ever because during the pandemic, it seems that there's been a lot of ageism and that older people are more isolated than ever and can be an overlooked community, and that their voices need to be heard more than ever now during the pandemic. So we decided to get these shows out there, but then we thought, one is called Coming of Age. And then we thought, well, what do we do now during this time? How do we, I hate to use the word pivot, but how do we continue capturing stories? So we decided to use the tools, the digital tools we have now, Zoom, anything that you can to record your older loved ones and make it kind of a call to action for people to call and check in on their older loved ones right now and capture their stories. We had the good fortune of, my father was Bob Woolf, the sports and entertainment attorney, and Larry King, he was very close with. So he was my first phone call. I thought, well, to get this message out, why don't we interview luminaries and legends and see how they're doing right now? Larry was kind enough to do the interview, and which followed with Norman Lear and Tommy Chong and Ellen Burstyn and Marion Ross. And as Lou, as you showed the clip, I actually cold called Carl Reiner's management company and to my huge surprise, it got to the right person, and he granted us to do this interview with him. We didn't know at the time, as you can see, these interviews are kind of like time capsules of a life story of these legends and luminaries. My hope is, for each interview, I would introduce my children to Norman Lear, to Carl Reiner, because it's like, kids, you got to understand, I mean, kind of my children, but also younger audiences, that these are like legends that you need to know about. So we interviewed Carl Reiner. We were thrilled. He loved the piece so much that he posted on Twitter. And from what we hear, a real bucket list moment was that he and Mel Brooks watched it after their nightly Jeopardy musings, that they watched the clip together, which to me is, I mean, that's it for me.
You're done.
I'm done. And we woke up to the awful news that Mr. Reiner passed away, and actually found out through the news that we were the last interview. We didn't realize it until Time Magazine actually ran the first story that this was his last interview. So it was incredibly profound, and we're incredibly honored to have had that role.
So it's an amazing interview. The whole project's amazing. I encourage everyone to check it out. The clip that we didn't show you is now linked in the chat window, so people can go and see. And it's Tiffany actually telling this story, but you told it beautifully. So, but you get to see some of the other interviews as well in there. They're great. I'm a big fan, Tiffany, of intergenerational kinds of projects. I think it's so important. The strategy seemed to make sense. You told me that you were interviewing Carl Reiner, and all of a sudden he started shaving on the Zoom.
The best. Yeah, he started shaving, and I thought, does he not know he's on, or is he doing a bit? And I think he's doing a bit. I think it was a little comedic moment, and it was just like, wow, I'm watching this in real time. It was incredible.
And it was also like, it just kind of seemed to capture what's happening right now in the pandemic moment on these Zoom calls where we're all at home. I mean, I put up my fancy backdrop here, but we're at home and we're a little less guarded, and we're just seeing these kind of more raw moments. That's how it felt to me.
Absolutely. And I feel like this is such a moment in time of authenticity, that what we've captured in the series, and again, it's kind of, we had a very nimble budget, and this is just kind of putting things together quickly and trying to capture the stories in the best way we can. But the authenticity and the fact that Carl Reiner and Norman Lear, that they do want to talk right now, and they want to still be out there, and they're not only interesting, they're interested. They still, like Larry King said, you don't want to sit next to me on a plane. I mean, not right now, but because I'll talk your ear off. But that's what I find so beautiful about these legends, that they really could have hung their hat up at like 75 instead of had a great life, and they're still going, they're still working, they're still curious. Well,
I happen to know that Carl Reiner told Tiffany Woolf the dirtiest joke he's ever told. I made the mistake of not giving a disclaimer before we played In Quarantine, and there was a little bit of language, and I hope no one had their children on the call today. I'm not going to ask Tiffany to tell the joke on this call, but if you want to hear it, you can give her a call, and she can tell you. But what I do know is that you got to tell it to someone else.
Oh yeah, talk about, this is a name dropping moment for me here, but Carl Reiner told me the dirtiest joke I've ever heard, and I had to tell Norman Lear. So that was kind of fun.
That's some kind of achievement. We've been talking today, Tiffany, about how comedy supports us when we're down, helps us wrestle with thorny issues in a safe way. I'm just wondering what you've learned about how the world and how all of us view comedians and their importance in our lives in the wake of the response to the Reiner interview and the other work that you've done.
Sure, thank you.
Yeah.
The thing about Mr. Reiner's interview that was I think, impactful is that it was almost like he was giving a living eulogy, being that he had passed away less than a week later after the interview, after he put it on Twitter. And again, even in his last days at 98 years old, he's still being funny and still finding the funny in things and still trying to, I mean, that's what we do, right? As Jews is through adversity is where we find creativity and humor. And just the loss. I mean, I really felt like it really exemplified that time is of the essence to capture these stories, because you don't know when these older loved ones will be gone. And this was just a clear example of that. I've had the good fortune to be working on Robin Williams' new documentary called Robin's Wish. And it's just another example of the outpouring of love, and that these comedians and these legends of not only in entertainment, but as humans, as, you know, for humanity, they just resonate for generations to come. And how do we capture that before it's too late?
Well, we're all grateful to you for capturing some of these stories. I want to encourage everybody to watch, but also capture the stories of those that you love. I mean, we should all be following in the footsteps of Silver Screen Studios. These stories are so important. And I think in terms of the impact that comedians have on our lives, particularly, I think, as you say, Tiffany, as Jews, like, we're really drawn to comedy. There's great value in that, and we should value it, and we should support it. So speaking of someone who supports that and a whole lot more, I want to move us to David Katznelson. And as much as these talented folks have given us, they most likely wouldn't have been able to do any of this without the guidance and financial support of Reboot and its CEO, David Katznelson. David was a record company executive in the early part of his career. He was nominated for a Grammy in 2010 for his Alan Lomax in Haiti recordings from the Library of Congress. And David was a Rebooter first, and then a board member of Reboot. He's been with the organization in one capacity or another since the very beginning. And the beginning, we should say, is about 20 years ago. So much for being the young guns of the Jewish world, Dave. We're past those days, but thanks. I've known David for most of that time. And I can say with authority that if there is one thing that this man knows how to do, it's how to identify brilliant ideas, separate them from the so-so ideas, and then connect the right people together and the right funding to move from concept to creation. He is a producer par excellence, and there are countless, and I mean countless, audience members who have delighted to work that David has produced. So you've seen a little sample of that today, but let's hear a bit more about what he's been working on, what he plans to be working on. David, welcome. Thanks for all the work that you're doing. Canvas is really proud to support the Reboot Network.
Thank you. I mean, that's a mighty introduction, and you're going to have to give me this recording so I can play it for my mom. And I just really want to say thank you to all of you out there who I can't see, but I know you're there, to sit here and watch and listen to some of the artists and projects that we've been working on, because this is the heart and soul of what we do. And it is, it's always a pleasure I'm always so thankful to have a moment where we can actually take in the work that we're doing, because we're working on so much stuff. Sometimes we don't have a moment to just take it in, and just seeing all this has been really amazing for me. And I'm hoping that you enjoyed it too. As Lou said, Reboot is almost 20 years old. We do this by the high holiday season, so we're about 3 weeks away. And for 20 years, what Reboot has done is curated this incredible network of artists, and you've met some of them today. Thought leaders, people who can think big and have the ability of doing big things. And we bring them aboard by asking them big questions around Judaism and what we're inheriting, what is our inheritance worth, and what do we want to do about it. Big questions about Jewish identity. And then usually what's been happening is, and it's been happening since the very beginning, is that these people who we have been able to reach out to and engage, they've thought of ideas for projects, and it's Reboot's position to provide funding and production support for these projects and distribution and marketing once the projects are done. A couple of things that we think about when we always are, working on our projects. We want everything to be excellent. We believe that the only way truly into trying to engage a wide swath of Jews and wandering Jews is through excellence. And I think you've seen some of that today. The other thing I think is important to note that all of our projects have to have some sort of deep type of Jewish connection. We want to make sure that anybody who engages with our projects leaves with a heightened understanding or passion or even just questions about Judaism, and to help them, think about how to make Judaism their own or to inspire them in their lives, because we know their lives are complex and all over the place. We want to show how Judaism can have this really amazing part of it. Now, culture is a matter of taste. We know this, and therefore, that's why we really believe in creating a large, different kind of different types of projects for all tastes and broad interests. And the projects we've done over the past 20 years have had a real lasting impact on the Jewish community and beyond. So over the course of the last 20 years, we've been doing projects like Sukkah City, which is a national sukkah redesigning contest with Josh Four and our Reboot co-founder Roger Bennett, where they put out a call for sukkah designs throughout America and picked 10. And how we picked them was having some of the great architects of our lives sitting on a panel looking at these projects that people were submitting, hundreds and hundreds of them. And we picked 10 of them and had them built at Washington Square Park in New York. We had 250,000 people come during Sukkot, sitting in them, enjoying them. And, that's a project that to this day is still talked about, and a lot of the smaller communities around the country will run them themselves. It's just been great. One rebooter asked the big question, how can I bring Shabbat into my life? Which became a project called the Shabbat Manifesto, where we kind of thought about how if you can just take one component of Shabbat and live by it, then for 24 hours, that could be amazing. And from that came this idea, because it was at the same time of the rise of Silicon Valley and technology, about what it would look like to step away from technology for 24 hours. And that became the National Day of Unplugging. Hundreds of thousands of people have participated in the National Day of Unplugging over the last 10 years. And from that has also come the cell phone sleeping bag, which became such an amazing thing, where you put your cell phone in this little sleeping bag and you put it away, that it was featured in the Jewish Museum of New York when they talked about Jewish major cultural events over the last 100 years. Amazing project. We also have done, God, I don't have my slides on me, but let me go to some of the projects that we've done in the last 6 months. We were forced to pivot, and I will use that word. We were going to have a major ideas festival, our first ever Jewish ideas festival in San Francisco in March. We were the first organization to cancel a major festival like it. We were actually 2 days before South by Southwest. And we pivoted and went online with all of our programming. And the programming that you've seen today is all a product of the last 6 months. We have been busier than we've ever been before. And if you want to talk about return on investment, granted, what Alex was saying about Saturday Night Seder is very true. It's priceless to think about the type of, it's priceless to think about, the gifts that everybody gave who were part of that. But Reboot funded it for $21,000, and we, and they raised $3.5 million. We recently did a Shavuos program called Dawn, and we partnered with the Jewish Immersion Network in doing so. And we had over 30,000 viewers during the course of the evening. And I just want to say, most of the evening happened between 1 a.m. and 6 a.m. in the morning. We have created, Silver Screen Studios. We've created Steve's podcast. We've created Jena's show. And the list goes on. Casher and Casher. And all of this we've done the last 6 months. It's been a crazy ride. So here's the deal. I can't tell you the number of high-level performing artists that are having a hard time in the pandemic. And Reboot has an amazing and unique opportunity here. For the last 20 years, we've created this network, and some of the greatest artists of our time have a moment to focus on Jewish projects. And as Alex said, we need to pay them. We need to continue to make Jewish content, and the creators need to be paid for their genius. It's just the way it needs to be. We have partnered with, we're partnering with Hillel right now on doing a huge High Holidays program, and that's going to incorporate the work of many of our rebooters, of looking at all the different aspects of the high holidays, and we're going to be running 10Q at the same time. And I just want to say there's a power to this network. It's a power to this network, and this kind of network needs the support to continue to produce great stuff. And I see it every day. And for every project that we're working on, there's more that are coming up. And that's the reason why we're actually trying to bolster our studio right now, so we're able to not miss opportunities as they rise. And that's really the work of Reboot. And again, it's just really a pleasure to talk to all of you today about it, and to show the work that we've been working on. So really, thank you very, very much.
David, thank you. Thank you for being here. Maybe everybody can turn their screens back on one last time. We've just got a couple minutes left. I thought we could just go around quickly and say, is there anything, and let me just summarize for a second before I ask you a final question. We've heard a lot today about a number of different themes that are particularly important to the work that we're doing at Canvas, and certainly we encourage you to look into any and all of the programs that you've seen here today, the organizations like Reboot, like the Jewish Book Council, et cetera. We encourage you to think strategically about how you're investing in creativity. And as I mentioned earlier, that could be looking at the budgets and helping to underwrite budget lines with organizations you already support to make sure that they can actually pay artists and creatives a living wage and pay them at the rates that they deserve. We are depending on artists and creative people more than ever. And David spoke to the theme of excellence. We talked about it with Steve, with Tiffany, with Alex. This theme is particularly important right now. And I think that we all have to acknowledge that in a world of infinite choice, in a world of Netflix and Amazon and Hulu, and anybody can choose anything, it can't be any less than excellent. But there is so much excellence that is out there. So we've had an opportunity to see today some examples of that. The work that Tiffany, Alex, Steve, David are all doing, Jena for that matter, it's so valuable to who we are, where we come from. And I would argue that art and culture, these are the glue, this is the glue that holds a community together. There's been a lot of concern, a lot of money devoted to the idea that our community is not holding together, is somehow falling apart, is somehow dissolving. A lot of people have used the Pew survey, which has become kind of infamous in the Jewish funding community, to point to and as evidence that Jews don't care about the community anymore. They're not committed to this community. And yet, when we look more closely at that survey, we see that 94% of the respondents actually said they're proud of their Jewish identities. They like who they are. So the question becomes, or the question we have to ask ourselves is, do they like what we're offering them? And if they don't, what do we need to do about that? What is it about that? And I think, at least in the case of arts and culture, it's about making sure that the quality is great. But culture is the coin of the realm in the 21st century. This is the point of entry. This is the way we get to know ourselves. It's the way we get to understand other cultures. And this is not simply about the Jewish community. This is about other groups understanding who Jews are. What a great way to address anti-Semitism. What better way than putting on Saturday Night Seder? What better way than listening to Steve and Senator Booker talk about Torah? I mean, there is no better way, at least as a starting point. So I would submit that this is very much worth your time, worth your investment, certainly worth your consideration as you're thinking strategically about supporting the many, many organizations and projects that you already support. There is no shortage of need out there, particularly right now, but the ways in which arts and culture can support those other areas of need, I think is quite significant. So I just jumped on the soapbox and used up the remainder of our time. So I apologize to our guests for that, but I want to thank you so much, Steve, Tiffany, Alex, Jena, David Katz-Nelson, thank you all for joining. We look forward to doing more of this again in the future. Tamar, David Ezer, thanks again for giving us this platform. We're grateful to Jewish Funders Network for making it all possible.
Thank you, and thank you, Lou, and thank you to all the presenters. I've been a fan and a consumer of all of your content for a while now, and it's exciting for me to have been able to work with you to put this together. And so thank you for all that you do to keep us educated and entertained and inspired. And thank you, Lou, for keeping us thinking about Canvas and all that we can do to help this community. And if anybody is interested in getting in touch with any of the presenters or Lou to talk more about Canvas and what they do and how you can get involved, you can reach out to me and I would be happy to make that connection. So Shana Tova to everybody, and thank you and have a wonderful day.
Good, sweet New Year. Thanks.